I'm Jeff Oliva. I'm the Vice President of Global Resorts at Burton. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Kelly Clark for 18 years. She is absolutely incredible. Whether it's helping us out with a resort photo shoot or helping us introduce really young kids to snowboarding and physical education in elementary schools, Kelly has always made the time. No matter what community she's living in, she always wants to give back. If you take a look at her career, it's absolutely incredible. Spanning 18 years, 5 Olympics, 3 Olympic medals, 8 US Open medals, and 14 X Games medals. Now, if you stack her against the top female athletes, if you look right there, that 47% win rate is outstanding. So 47% of the time she entered a snowboard competition, she won. So impressive. If you stack it against the top male athletes, once again, you'll see how impressive that win rate is. So I'm very honored and excited to introduce Kelly Clark to you today. But before I do that, I want to share one of her winning moments.
The winningest US Open rider in the history of this event, coming out of West Dover, Vermont, riding for Burton Snowboards. This is Kelly Clark. What a show she put on today. And it was typical Kelly Clark. She drops in for her first run, puts down a score, 86.88, highest of the day. The other rider, she's not too far ahead of Corral Castellet. What does she do on her second run? She ups it by 3 points, 89.33.
And I would not be surprised right now if Kelly put down a run in the 90s, even though she doesn't need it. Even though this is her victory lap, Kelly Clark might want to just put an exclamation point on this. So when you look at the standings tomorrow, you know, oh yeah, Kelly blew the rest of the field away, and she's doing so right now.
Look at how high she's landing on that transition. Tail right below the lip, pumping the wall, keeping a hard edge to the flat bottom, and going absolutely massive. Kelly Clark is just putting on a clinic right now. That was unbelievable.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Clark.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. Thanks, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us today. It's a huge honor for me to be here. I'm excited to get to share some of my life, some of my process. Sports have such a good way of just illustrating kind of life's principles. I've been with Burton Snowboards for the last 20 years. This marks my 20th year with the brand, which is a pretty incredible relationship I've had with them. I've had a abnormally long snowboard career. I'm technically very old to be a pro snowboarder at 35. So it's been really fun though. I've really learned everything that I've learned to kind of develop into the person that I am through snowboarding. They have kind of a rubber meets the road type of ability to show you what you're capable of and show you what you built. I always say I train 30 seconds. I trained 4 years for a 30-second half-pipe run. So there's a lot that goes into the behind the scenes that people don't see. Any snowboarders in here? Any skiers in here? Hey, okay, you guys can stay. We still like you. I was up in Tahoe last week, and there's a lot better snow than there has been the last few years. So it should be a really fun winter. I grew up in Vermont. I live in Sacramento currently. And I started snowboarding when I was 7. It was the first year it was even allowed at my home resort, 1990. I always say that I started snowboarding before it was cool. There was no such thing as the Winter X Games, and it was long before it ever became an Olympic sport. And honestly, I never wanted to compete. It was really, I actually was a ski racer, and I skipped enough ski racing practice to have my parents stop paying for that, just so I could snowboard all the time. And I never wanted to compete because the kind of ski racing vibe was really cutthroat and competitive. And as a young kid, it just didn't appeal to me. And I had the opportunity to go to high school where it was essentially a private school where I could go to school half day and snowboard half day, and that sounded like a pretty good gig to me. And I just knew I wanted to spend more days on the hill, and to be able to go to this school, I had to compete. So I thought, okay, I'll get into competition. That was when I was 14 years old. And I actually just kind of fell in love with it. It was, I was halfway decent at it, which was great. And I really enjoyed it. And then I remember, you don't often think you make big decisions when you're 14 years old. It was 1998, and it was the first year that snowboarding became an Olympic sport. And I remember I had recorded it on a VHS tape. Anybody, VHS tapes? I probably like recorded over an episode of Friends or something, but I had recorded the Olympics, snowboarding's debut, and I remember everything about that day. I remember where I was, I remember what I was wearing, I remember what the weather was like, and I saw snowboarding become an Olympic sport, and I knew right then and there that this was a dream that I wanted to give my life to. And 4 years later, I found myself in my first Olympics in 2002. I then followed it up with Italy in Torino, Vancouver, Sochi, Russia, and then my last Olympics was in Korea. So over 16 years, I've had the privilege of representing my country 5 different times. And I've won, lost, draw, all that. I've had a wide range of Olympic experiences. And it's been fun to kind of pull on those and see the personal growth in my life. You know, through snowboarding, I've learned to be successful, so to speak. I've learned a great deal about failure, but more so than anything, I've learned to enjoy what I do. And that's what I want to talk about today. How do we not only be successful, but how do you actually thrive in the environment that you're in? And you know, I live in a performance culture. Every weekend in the winter, I go out there and see what I built and see if I have what it takes. But you don't have to be an Olympian to find yourselves living in a performance culture. You know, we only have to pick up our phones to have a glance at social media and start comparing ourselves to one another. It's where we find ourselves living a lot of the time, is in this performance world. But the good news is just because we live in this culture, it doesn't mean that culture gets to live within inside of us. So there's a few things that I want to touch on today that have really helped me learn to thrive in that environment, in that performance world. And I'm just going to hit on those, and I'm going to tell a few stories to kind of illustrate that. Does that sound good? So we talk about performance culture, but what does that actually mean? In the performance world, it says, I wonder if I'm enough. I will sacrifice respect and honor to get ahead. I will work for everything, and I will compete to earn what I deserve. And this is the big thing. External success is the only thing that matters in a performance world. So those are the things, that's the place we find ourselves in. It seems pretty extreme when I list it out like that. But those are the things, that's the race we find ourselves in a lot of the time. And I'm just going to touch on thriving here for a minute too. How many of you guys have succulents at home? Anybody? Proud succulent owner? Would you say they're thriving or RIP succulents? Maybe RIP succulents, huh? That happens. You know, you can be successful and not be thriving, but it's hard to be thriving and not feel successful. And it only takes us looking at our houseplants to see if something's thriving, and usually when something's thriving, it means that it's growing. And that's honestly what it means to thrive. If something's growing, we say, oh, we put that plant right where it needed to be. We gave it the right amount of water. It's in the right environment. And when it grows, that's what we say. Hey, my plants are thriving. I don't know how many green thumbs we have in here, but I know you often think you're thriving when you're winning. You think you're thriving when you're successful. But as I'll kind of dive into this, success just looks like growth. And that's what we need to be doing in our lives, and that's what we need to be putting in the win column. So the few things that I want to bring up that I've really found in my career that have helped me be successful and thrive and enjoy what I do Honestly, it all starts with our identity. It's so easy to get a sense of self-worth and a sense of significance wrapped up in our performance. In sports, we see it the most. We see the roughest transitions when athletes retire, because they get so much of their self-worth in their performance. And it's a natural thing to do. That's how we identify each other. When we meet people, we say, oh, who are you and what do you do? You know, it's very easy to find yourself operating in that place. But I'd like to propose that success isn't what we're looking for. I think we're looking for a deep sense of significance. And I think we try to fill that with success and with performance. I know I've done that a ton in my career. When your self-worth is tied to your performance, we can't take risks. Think about it. If I'm in a snowboard contest, and I'll actually use an example from Russia. Heading into the 2014 Olympics, I was a heavy gold medal favorite. I was supposed to perform well. I was probably, if I look back at my career, that was probably kind of the prime time of my snowboard career. And I was 30 years old, and it was my 4th Olympics. I had kind of all the bugs out of my system. I was pretty comfortable knowing what I wanted to accomplish at that time. And when we showed up for the event, it was 55 degrees. And if anybody knows what snow does when it's 55 degrees, it becomes very challenging. And I took my first run at 1 p.m. and 3 rounds of competition happened before my final run, which was around 9 p.m. And as you can imagine, in those temps, the pipe deteriorated in epic fashion. When I showed up for finals, I remember I took 5 runs in practice for finals, and I moved my 1080 3 different times, and I couldn't get it to work. I fell 5 runs in a row in my practice for finals. And now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna fall in the contest, but especially at the Olympics, like you want your practice to go well. It's gonna kind of set the tone for your performance that evening. And I remember I went down and I saw a sea of Team USA people kind of staring at me, knowing that the train had completely fallen off the tracks. And I saw my sports psychologist, and I looked at her and I said, hey, you know what, I actually need to go and have a good cry, and then I think I'm gonna be ready. I think if your significance and your personal view is tied to your performance, you really can't take those risks that you need to. And because everything in life is an opportunity or a threat. And I needed to look at that moment as an opportunity. And in a performance world, we're at our worst when we're afraid. Have you ever seen somebody, heard a story of someone drowning, you know, when somebody goes to save them, they actually try to drown the person that's trying to save them. We are at our worst when we are afraid. And I was looking at these next 2 runs in the Olympics. I had waited 4 years. I had spent an entire lifetime since I was 14 investing in this dream. And it's going as bad as it possibly can go. After my ugly cry, I went to the top and I said, okay, this is an opportunity to overcome a bad situation. And you know what happened? My next run, I went and I landed my 10 for the first time that night, but took off early on my 7. And I hit the deck, and I like to call it like a reverse taco, if you can imagine that. I bounced to the flat, reverse taco, and I fell in epic fashion. And I was probably more prepared for a first run fall than a poor practice. I knew, even though I'd fallen 6 runs in a row, I still had an opportunity. If I was so caught up in the expectation of being the gold medal favorite, if I was so caught up in maintaining my reputation and what people thought, and what I even demanded of myself, I would not be in an opportunity position. I would be in a threat. And in a performance world, we need to be at our best. I went back to the top. I saw my coach, and you know, we had been through this scenario a lot of times. Those first run falls, it happens. This last week, I was counting up a bunch of my my competition bibs, and I have over 190. And so those first run falls, it's happened a few times. And I went back up, And to be quite honest, it was the hardest thing that I ever did. But I told my coach, hey, what an opportunity. 6 runs, I've fallen consecutively. I was the last person to go of the entire event because I'd qualified first for finals, so we run in reverse order. And I dropped in and I landed a run. And it was good enough to put me on the Olympic podium. And I'd fallen 6 runs in a row, only to land my 7th when it mattered most. And I was so proud of my performance. It wasn't necessarily my best snowboarding. I've snowboarded a lot better than that. But to overcome that personally in that situation, I was really able to those situations, they reveal where your identity is. When you look to what you're responding to around you and how you're going to react in those situations, we need to be our best. And that sort of outlook, looking at things as an opportunity, is really a big way to do that. How you guys doing? You awfully quiet? Everybody good? So the next thing I want to touch on is we need to have a healthy idea of success. If you want to thrive in a performance culture, that's something that you're going to have to work out. What does success look like to you? Honestly, that's what I set out to do with my book. I wanted to help people define success in a healthy way. As you can gather, my idea of success isn't confined to just winning. If I were to say what my personal definition of it is, I want to be able to look back at my journey and say, I was really faithful with the opportunities that were in front of me, and I didn't let one go by. And I also asked myself if I was growing. If those 2 things are happening in my life, if I made the most of my opportunities and I had some measure of growth, honestly, that's more successful than you could ever hope to be. And the last thing on my little mini list here that I want to set you guys up with is, after 20 years of snowboarding, I've come to the conclusion that if your dream only includes you, it's too small of a dream. I found that we're really thriving in life when other people are involved. Whatever culture you live in, whatever dream you're building, if you're the only one in it, it's just too small of a dream. If you build yourself, your influence will go away when you're no longer performing. You limit yourself if you only build yourself. We have to figure out how to build things that will outlast our ability to perform. So, a few of the just kind of fundamental building blocks. We've got to work out that identity piece. We have to develop a healthy idea of success. And we have to find value in building others. But the most important thing that I've learned throughout my career has really helped me thrive. I've learned to look at the things that no one sees and treat them as more valuable than the things that everyone sees. If it sounds strange and unfamiliar, it's because it is. It's not natural. It's not our go-to. But the world inside of me and the personal victories and the wins that aren't on TV, that nobody beyond my friends and family will ever see, those are the things that I value much more than any placement, than any medal that I could win. The world inside of you has to be more important than the world around you. If you ever find yourself, if you ever feel like life's happening to you, it's a pretty good indication that you're not living from a value set and making decisions. You're not living intentionally. You're living reactionary. And we really have to work on this inner world, this idea of success, this identity stuff, our big picture and building others. And we have to learn to treat the things that nobody sees as more important than the ones that are on display. So there's how many of you guys watched the Olympics this last year? Anybody catch the women's half pipe? I was there. This is the ultimate story of valuing things that no one sees, more than what the NBC cameras will show you. I set out to do the impossible last year. No woman from the U.S. had ever made 5 Winter Olympic teams in any sport. And, you know, I've been the veteran now for, 10 years in snowboarding. The women that I compete with are quite literally half my age. I remember, I believe it was 2 summers ago, I was on the podium with 2 women, and if you added up their ages, it literally equaled mine. And I'm 35. It's like I'm not old. I didn't think I was old until I look around and they say the TV shows that I like aren't funny because they have live studio audiences. It's interesting. It happens quick. But, you know, I knew this Olympics would be my last rodeo. It would be the last time I got the chance to do this. And in January, I found myself named to the Olympic team. And it was in Mammoth Mountain, California, which was my home resort for a long time, and it was just a sweet win at that final Olympic qualifier. Now they named the Olympic qualifier, or they named the Olympic team. The last qualifier is only 2 weeks before opening ceremony starts. So it's not this, you know, you're on the team for a long time. There's literally 2 weeks, and I think the night that you get named to the team manager is calling you to book your plane ticket because they need to pay for it. And there's a small contest that falls in between when they name the team and when we go to the Olympics, and it's called the X Games. And a lot of people you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it as an opportunity or a threat. You could say, hey, this is a great opportunity to go to this big event and get ready for the biggest event. Or I could play it safe and say, you know, I don't want to get hurt. I should probably protect myself and play it safe, which is something I've never been good at. And best way to get ready for a big contest is going to a big contest. And so I go to this event, and I'm trying to get my snowboarding to where it needs to be. And my first run's pretty good. I think I'm sitting in 2nd or 3rd place. And I'm pushing myself, trying to get my snowboarding to where it needs to be. And in my 2nd run, I go down extremely hard. I hit the deck again and bounced to the flat. And I actually was pretty okay up until that point. But when I hit the flat, my left knee was so crumpled. I was so crumpled. My left knee hit my left shoulder. And I heard a loud pop in my left knee. And I remember sitting there with the Mega Mo follow cam ski guy in my face with a camera, not being able to breathe because I'd knocked the wind out of myself, thinking, I'm pretty sure I just blew my ACL. And I'm thinking I just made the Olympic team, and I don't think I'm ever even going to get to go. So I pick myself up. I go down to the bottom of the pipe, and the U.S. team, we have all of our doctors and surgeons on hand, and I say, hey, I'm pretty sure I heard a pop, and I'm pretty sure I just heard my ACL go in my knee, and I can feel there's fluid in the back of my top of my calf above my boots filling with fluid, and my joints beginning to stiffen up. And so we go there, and X Games has their team of orthopedic surgeons, and I have my own team of orthopedic surgeons, and there's a manual test you can do. You guys are familiar, to kind of see if you have an endpoint. So they're doing all the manual tests. Multiple high-level orthopedic guys are all testing my knee, and they think I have an endpoint. They're like, we think you have an ACL, but we're gonna have to wait till Monday, and we'll get the MRI and we'll figure out what's going on. Monday comes around, and the radiologist is looking at the films after my MRI, and they can kind of, they know how to read the films, and they can kind of get an idea of what's going on in there. So I was asking the guy, I was like, hey, do you see my ligaments in there? You know, how's it look? And he's like, you know, I don't know much about your ligaments, but I do see the tibia plateau fracture. That's clear as day. And I thought, I'm sorry, what? He's like, yeah, the fracture in your tibia. That's really clear to see. I don't know if you have ligaments or not, but definitely broke your leg. And I didn't see that coming. I talked to my surgeon that night, and I said, hey, what's going on? And he said, you have an ACL, you have a severe bone bruise, and you've cracked your tibia plateau. The good news is it's in an area where it's not extremely weight-bearing, but you definitely have a fracture. And so what does this mean? You know, what are we looking at now? We've got maybe a week and a half until we fly to Korea. So we get my coach on the phone and we look at everything and they say, hey, you know, we think we can get you through this. And he said, here's the plan. We brace you up with this giant mechanical leg. We immediately load your knee to create a little bit of space in your joint. And we load you up on WADA and USADA approved anti-inflammatories. And you have to agree not to practice up until qualifiers for the Olympic Games. And I said, hey, I think we can do that. But I had to ask my coach, I said, hey, if you want to send somebody who perhaps doesn't have a broken leg, I would give up my spot. I understand that. And he said, no, I would always bet on you, you know? And so I have the most incredible support team. And I put full faith and full trust in them. And I flew to my fifth Olympics with a fractured tibia. I remember I was late for my plane actually in San Francisco, and I was trying to get to the plane quickly and I couldn't even run walk. It was excruciating, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I got to Korea. We gradually got me in the gym. I didn't practice for the entire event. I think I took 3 runs in the half pipe before qualifiers. Qualifiers came around, and I just barely snuck in there because, I mean, every half pipe's so different. And I'm honestly learning to ride with the mechanical leg sort of brace was very new and very challenging for me. And I snuck in there. They took 12 people in the finals, and I qualified in 11th. You know, it was not my best snowboarding, but I made it. And I was honestly believing the dream again at this point. I was thinking, gosh, I've overcome so much. I totally want that fairy tale ending. I want that medal. I want one more, kind of just that fairy tale ending. I wanted to finish well. And I can honestly say the day of finals, anti-inflammatory pills, adrenaline, whatever it was, I can honestly say my injury did not affect my performance that day. I rode lights out, as the kids say, out of my mind. And I rode so well. I put down 3 runs that were perfect in my mind. I could have dealt with less tears and more practice. But my performance that day, it was as good as it could have been. I put down some of my best runs at my 5th Olympic Games. And I came so far, overcame so much, and I was waiting for my final score to pop up, and I didn't see the letter or the number 1, 2, or 3, but I saw the number 4 pop up, and I would remain in 4th, keeping my Olympic streak alive to never worse than 4th, which is pretty good. But 4th, you only get your participation medal from the Olympics, which is probably controversial in itself, participation medals. But I didn't get on the podium. And I remember standing there, and I had a microphone put in my face, and in front of millions and millions of people, I was asked for a reason why this didn't work out. What happened, Kelly? What went wrong? And I had every opportunity to find a reason why. I actually had a good reason why. P.S. I broke my leg 2 weeks ago. But you know what happened? The world inside of me popped to the surface. And I was able to respect the people I was competing with. I was able to respect the judging and the formats. I was able to keep my integrity and keep my honor. And the world inside of me proved to be much bigger than the world that I was in at that time. You know, people always ask me what one of my Olympic medals, which I brought with me today, I'll let you guys all check them out at the end. you know, which one of your Olympic medals means the most to you? And I've really found that they're very prestigious, but it's what they represent that gives them value. And you value things based off of what they cost you. You know, some of these medals are more expensive than perhaps the one when I was 18. You know, I won Olympic gold in Salt Lake City when I was 18 years old, and it's easy being a rookie. No expectation, no pressure. Russia, I would say, is probably my favorite medal because I know what it cost me. It was so expensive. It took everything that I had. You know, my idea of a fairy tale ending was one more shot at that Olympic podium. But I think standing upright in the face of loss, in the face of disappointment was perhaps the most valuable end that I ever could have had. And that moment was much more costly. Keeping your integrity costs a lot sometimes. You don't find it in very fun situations often. But I'm beginning to see that perhaps I should view that experience differently because of the success and the win that actually happened on the inside of me that people wouldn't say was necessarily successful. No one knew what I overcame that day. You know, at the end of the event, I went home and I had hundreds of text messages and voicemails and emails, and I kind of just blurry-eyed stared at my phone, and there was one message that popped up that caught my attention and I think speaks to the value of what actually happened that day. It's from one of my longtime manager, who I've been with since I was 15 years old, and he had watched the event on TV with his son, and he wrote me this email. I'm going to read to you. He said, "Congratulations on an amazing finals. If you've taught me one thing, it's that we're fools to allow the judgment of others to influence our own appreciation of performance. This seems especially true today. Having seen each of your Olympic runs over your long career, I can say this was some of your best work. You started strong, yet strategically contained, pushed it further in the second, and under the greatest pressure, crushed it in the third. It reminds me of Torino, where you did more for women's snowboarding than most gold medal performances combined. You'll enjoy listening to Todd Richards' commentary about what he thought about your run. I saw your interview after the event with Tina Dixon. I could see and feel your frustration and disappointment, but your maturity and perspective prevailed, and you showed class and composure that few athletes could muster. Benny, who's his son, who is now 14, was watching with me, and he asked me, 'Dad, how can she be so calm and nice after that?' I smiled when he asked me that. Through 5 Olympics, Kelly, you've managed to find so many ways, in addition to winning and medals, to inspire people to be better than they could have previously imagined. And as much as I know you wanted to win, and I wanted you to win as a parent would, it's much more precious an opportunity to discover a moment of such magnitude and as an athlete of such profound talent and historical significance to demonstrate the values you embody. There will be many medals awarded over these Olympics, but I know Benny wouldn't have asked me that question had you not thrown down the runs you did, been dealt the scores you received, and handled it the way you did. And in terms of inspiration, it's moments like that that can make a huge difference in a kid's life and in the world. I'm so proud of you, Kelly, what you've done, who you are, and how you've lived your life. And I've been a privilege to be part of it, and the effect you have on people transcends results, medals, and transcends snowboarding. I can't wait to see how you inspire people outside of the halfpipe, whenever that may be. And I promise you that I'll support you in those efforts however I can for as long as I can. So we measure success based off of what color medal we get, and we don't always place a value on things like this. That was the message that I needed to hear when I went home heartbroken that day, realizing that there's so much more than just performance. It wasn't something everyone saw, but perhaps it's more valuable than 1 million gold medals could ever be. We have to build things that outlast our ability to perform. My life is a testament to going after a dream. We're supposed to go after all that's in our hearts and hit all of our potential. And it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies all the time. There's going to be a lot of hard days, but it should be enjoyable. We think everything should always be fun, and people also hear what I do for a living, and they say, well, that must be really fun. And I'm like, it is really fun. And a lot of people, especially professional athletes, are like, why do you do it? And you're like, it's so fun. Like, I'm sorry, it's like, spoiler alert, it's not always going to be fun, but it should be enjoyable. And if you can work out how to not be defined by what you do, how to build others up, how to define success in a healthy way, and how to value the things that no one sees more than the things that are on display, you will have a successful career, and there's going to be a lot of growth. You're going to be thriving, and you're going to be enjoying what you do. For me as a snowboarder, I've had a very long career, and I've had more success than anyone could ever dream. When I was 14, I've had more success than I ever began to dream about. And I'm so thankful, and it's been such a privilege. And if it was about accomplishing things, if it was about winning things, I probably should have stopped a long time ago. You have to figure out how to make what you do more than that. You have to figure out how to develop something inside of you that will sustain you no matter what environment you go into. Burnout doesn't come from too much activity. If anybody should be burned out, it should be me. I've done 1 million snowboarding contests. It really comes from unmet expectations. And so if you can spend time developing that inner world, you're going to be able to go into any world and hit your potential and be your best and enjoy it. And always remember that if your dream only includes you, it's just too small of a dream. Thank you.
I was curious, at the beginning you said you are training always for basically 30 seconds of a half pipe run. And I'm curious how you go about sort of maintaining that mindset of training when the actual performance, to me it seems like it's always so far away and such a blip in time.
I think you need to have an idea of what you want to accomplish regardless of what's going on around you. As I would approach the Olympics, I knew where my snowboarding was going to need to be. I think it's easy to get caught up in looking around to what my fellow competitors were doing. But if you can figure out what it is you want to accomplish, it's something that you can work on regardless of what's going on around you. So it may look like what we do is kind of like, oh my goodness, I just tried this trick today. I think it took me 7 years to first land a 1080. So it's very much in the scope of what you want to do. And no matter what you accomplish, and especially in snowboarding, you're never the best. And there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not challenged. And I think that's what kept me motivated, is I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed constantly learning things. And if I wasn't learning new things, I probably wouldn't have been in the game for as long as I was.
Hi. So thematic to everything you've been able to discuss today, did you ever have a situation in your career where you felt disconnected from the things that brought you and kept you in the sport? And if so, how did you recognize a disconnect? How did you identify that was happening?
I talk about a lot of these concepts and a lot of things that have sustained me. I mean, goodness, I wrote a book about it. But you just never arrive in life, and there's so many times where I have to be willing to examine my heart in situations where I maybe didn't find my inner world as well developed as I hoped, where maybe jealousy popped up, maybe I wanted to be right, maybe I wanted to have an excuse. And the way that I was able to you have to be okay not having it all together. You never master it. You have to be willing to be a work in progress. And when I found myself maybe not operating the way that I wanted to. Maybe I'm feeling really threatened all of a sudden, and I'm like, wow, I thought I had that figured out. I thought I looked at everything as an opportunity, and I was killing it. I actually really pulled on other people. So being in community and allowing people into your process was really, really healthy. I think we have the idea, especially in sports, where, in all of culture, we champion self-made millionaires. We say when you're isolated, when you came from nothing and now you're something. I think you can be successful, but it's not very fulfilling doing it that way. And letting people in. Behind every great athlete is a team of great people. There's no self-made millionaires in the athletic world. And every time that I failed, messed up, felt like I had learned this lesson long ago, but I was relearning it for the 100th time, it was my coaches and it was people who believed in me on the days that I didn't believe in myself.
So first of all, thanks for coming and thanks for the talk. My question is now looking back, after having gone through your career, if you were to look back and talk to the 14-year-old you who was dreaming at the time and how things have changed since then, what type of advice and recommendation would you give them that you didn't necessarily have back then?
Honestly, the most important thing that I've ever learned in my snowboarding career is that identity thing. I think not a lot of people get to reach the top of something. Most of the time life is a journey, and all of a sudden I was 18 years old and I won the X Games, the Olympics, and the US Open all in the same season. I'd accomplished everything I ever wanted to do, and I just had equated that success meant that I was fulfilled. And at a really young age, I had to figure that out. I was like, wow, this isn't what life's about. My life is not complete because I accomplished a list of to-dos. I had to develop a strong sense of self outside of that. And in the sports world, you just see it so plainly. There's such a level of insecurity in performance culture that is just unsettling. And so when I look at young girls, that's the number one thing that I say, young athletes, hey, you got to figure this part out before you can navigate this really well, because it just makes it just doesn't make it fun when there's so much more freedom and so much more enjoyment when you can sort that identity piece out.
Where are your top 3 mountains to snowboard?
What'd you say?
What's your top 3 mountains to snowboard?
I lived in Mammoth, California forever, and I love that resort. They do a great job kind of maintaining their terrain parks, and then they get 300 days of sun, and when it's not sunny, it's just nuking snow. That's a great mountain. Snowmass in Colorado is really fun if you like the groomers. Really top-notch groomers there. And then my favorite destination to go snowboarding would be Japan. Hokkaido, North Island, Japan is always my number one pick. You ever get the opportunity to go there, I would highly recommend it.
Thanks so much for coming, Kelly. I'm curious just on training routines, training for Olympics. What did a typical day look like, and how did that change over the course of your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, like I referenced before, snowboarding really wasn't a sport when I started, and there's so much kind of lifestyle and easygoingness attached to it. And I remember in 2010, I had been to 3 Olympic Games, I had 2 Olympic medals, and the US snowboard team said, hey, would you like to come in for fitness testing? It just wasn't even on our radar before then. We're not like real athletes, you know? And so I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. I could, do some high jumps for you or whatever. And I did it, and I was like, hey, what do my results mean? And my trainer, to this day, I still bring this up every once in a while. She says, wow, you must be really mentally strong. And I was like, wait, this is a fitness test. That's like telling someone they have a nice personality. You're beautiful on the inside, you know? And I'm like, seriously? And she's like, yeah, it's pretty incredible what you've been able to accomplish. And I'm like, what? and hence all this like interpersonal, inner world development, you know. But I could have either been really offended or looked at it as an opportunity. And I said, you know what, this is an untapped resource. So in 2010, I said, hey, let's figure out what it looks like to train a snowboarder. We don't even know. There's no data. We know how to train baseball players and football players, but we don't know what does it look like for ideal body comps and different things. So I was like, I give you 4 years. And in those 4 years, when I was mentioning like kind of my peak of my career, I went up to winning 86% of the contests I entered, and my consistency and my durability went through the roof. And I was the only one on the US team in 4-year span who didn't require a surgery, and I was older than everybody. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is an incredible resource. And so that was a big part of the second part of my career. And heading into this last Olympics, I think I was logging 22 to 24 hours of dry land training a week. And it's a lot of, light and lean is what we would train for. We'd have 2 days of cardio. We'd have 2 days of strength training, 3 days of core. And they would kind of overlap over a 6-day span with 1 day off. So light and lean, a lot of stability stuff, a lot of body weight stuff. I can get more into detail after it, but it's kind of a work in progress. And we would profile my body comps when I would perform really well. And we'd start to discover, okay, so I'm performing my best when my body looks like this. Okay, that's our target. Like we were starting from scratch. So.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for everything you've done for the sport. My question is, being a woman snowboarder, was there a point where you realized that you were not only a champion for this snowboarding as a sport as a whole, but for women boarders, and then becoming a household name as a woman athlete?
Yeah, you know, in snowboarding, there's not a different size ball that we play with. We're on the same kind of venue as the guys. And when I was growing up, I was one girl kind of in a pack of guys. And I got on the US team, and I found kind of a crew of girls to ride with. And there was people who went before me that really inspired me and that I looked up to. I remember waiting in line to get people's autographs at the US Open, and then I found myself having little kids waiting in line to get autographs at the US Open when I was 18. And I thought, gosh, I'm in a position to be able to inspire people. And that's kind of how I looked at it. I thought I have a responsibility and an opportunity to impact people in a positive way. And I just looked at it as a privilege, and I tried to do my best knowing that I really had a lot of influence. And, you know, there's not a ton of, I think at Burton we have a woman CEO, and she's been an advocate for women and for everything from equal prize money to women in leadership at the company for a very long time. And so we didn't see it as a huge kind of contrast between the men and women, because I think I was so close to it and our leadership was always empowering to women. It just kind of seemed natural and normal. When I kind of grew up a bit and saw other sports, I realized how unique snowboarding actually was. So I just tried to make sure that I was always, I guess, the same person too. I think anytime you're in a place of influence, you want to be the same person that you are when you're winning or losing, at the top of the hill, at the bottom of the hill, when you're home with your friends and when you're with your family. And so I strive to live a life of consistency and authenticity, because I think that's a huge attribute in snowboarding that we have a huge value for. And I think it's been a cool journey to see the sport grow, especially with the young women.
Curious, again, sort of like a question about how you deal with challenges, and like when you take these massive slams. You touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could go to a little bit more detail about like what are you really thinking about? Like how do you actually get yourself to like come over that hurdle right then and get yourself up and go again?
My coach has a saying, and it's if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. And I heard that often at the top of the pipe when I was discouraged. You know, I kind of always had an idea that nothing was impossible, and I wouldn't let my circumstances decide things for me. So even when I did take those big crashes, when I did take those big falls, it was a mix of personal drive and then people believing in me and speaking into me as well. It was those coaches, it was those friends, it was the people being willing to ask for help and not have it together all the time, and being willing to be challenged and fail to know that eventually you, Thomas Edison, just learn a bunch of ways not to make a light bulb. Using all those failures as like, well, I learned one way not to do it. I guess I should try again. And you want to stay, snowboarding, especially, it's a high impact sport. You want to stay within your ability level when you take this, and you want to be realistic. And so, in talking to my coaches, do you think this is a realistic trick for me to work on? And what kind of steps am I going to need to take to get there? And not everything's instant. And I think, getting strong enough to take those risks, especially as I got older in my career, was really helpful as well. So I knew if it didn't go well, most likely I would bounce. Hopefully I would bounce. That was kind of my plan. Was it a good plan or not? Was there a specific trick or anything else that made you more nervous than usual before a run or an event? Typically, your most difficult run or your most difficult trick is the one you think about, but it's kind of a catch-22 because you really can only focus on one thing at a time. I remember we had a sports psychologist come by our team one time, and he gave us 2 tennis balls. One guy was supposed to throw it up and down really quickly, and the other one was supposed to be thrown across the room. And we were told to keep track of how many times each tennis ball was thrown. After about 20 seconds, he said, "What'd you come up with?" We're like, we all lost count. And he said, that's the point. You can't focus on 2 things at the same time. And my 1080 was probably my hardest trick. But if I was thinking about doing a 1080 on my 3rd hit, when I dropped in for my 1st hit, guarantee you I would fall 1st hit on a straight air. So, you want to anticipate those things, but by the time you get to those events, by the time you get to the Olympics, you should have it figured out. Those are muscle memory things. It's not something that, they can be intimidating, but it's not going to be something you're going to have to think your way through. Your body knows what to do by that time. And it was really a battle to really just stay on the task at hand or in the moment. I remember I was hiking up, one of my friends that I snowboarded with for a long time. We had the same coach, and she was talking through her run with Ricky, my coach, and it's going to look like this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this, and then I've got to look here on this. I got to be careful to keep my speed and that. And I'm like listening to her, like, whoa, that's a lot. And Ricky looks at me and he says, "Hey, what are you going to do, kid?" I said, "I'm going to do a good drop-in." And they just looked at me and they just laughed. They're like, "Seriously, that's your plan?" I'm like, "Totally. Everything else is, I know how to do it. I just have to make sure I get in there." And so it's a fine line between being prepared and then in the moment actually letting your body know what it knows how to do.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
Another round of applause, maybe?